And at what point from, say, 0 years old to 5 years old to 20 years old did you notice that something began to feel off?
Mm. Oh, it makes me a little sad just taking that question in because what I discovered in hindsight as w one of my first sessions of the somatic inquiry
Yeah,
was an early memory with when suddenly my mom became unsafe
yeah,
and she it showed itself through a forgotten memory as of her becoming a monster and me turning away in defense. I had I could now see in hindsight the moment when suddenly the world became unsafe. And
mm,
and and in that recognition was this is what I've held. This has been my perspective of living
yeah,
on this earth. It's
yeah,
unsafe and other people are unsafe. And that was, I don't know how early. I don't know if I was 3 years old, 5 years old, but around that 5 years old, I would say around that time.
yeah. And you came to that recognition much later, obviously. It's like, so by that stage, you'd gone from 10 years old, 15 years old, 25 to right to now. And then you've had an experience of actually, this is how I've been thinking and living for my whole life.
Exactly. Exactly like that.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so that was like a minor event that happened. Minor. um, but like, so as time goes on, was there any other like sort of major events that contributed to your life journey and life path?
Yeah, I think looking at it now, the most influential would have been starting school. And I remember in hindsight, again, these are memories that I had totally forgotten, but that has emerged in internal processing. It
Yeah.
was how much I loved my first day in school. I was so in love with other people, other children, and curious about them. So I would run through the schoolyard from one person to another, wanting to learn more about them and
Oh,
just being incredibly enthusiastic. At some point, bullying began, which
yeah.
changed my whole personality and how I showed up. And this was bullying in first and second grade. And because we moved, I started in a new school. And what immediately picked up and just got worse over the school years was the bullying.
Mm,
So I was bullied for so many different things that centered around me as a person, me as a human being. So it was sort of shipping on my confidence and in any sense of being able to enjoy myself and life, year after year. And this is a thing with bullying for me. It's not just a concept. When you're bullied, in at least in a sense I was bullied, it goes on day after day, week after week, month after month, incident after
mm,
incident. And it was throughout the years of grade school up to ninth grade, at which point it affected my self-image very deeply.
mm,
And in ninth grade, my mom's mental health issues and addictions had worsened, and her abuse of me had intensified up until the point of her committing suicide,
mm,
which happened during a time period of me being uh, increasingly more isolated, without friends, without ability to connect with girls, uh,
mm,
simply being very alone with a very low self-esteem. This struck very, you know, very hard to my core.
Mm.
And that set me on a roll of, you know, dropping out of I don't know this in English, but the higher grades beyond ninth grade. I dropped out of school
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and I moved towards, you know, street fighting, drugs, crim low grade criminality, or how to put it, moving with
yeah,
gangs, facing other gangs on the streets, that kind of thing.
yeah. So that's in grade nine, was that?
No, it was when I was at my 15 or about to turn 15 and the
Okay,
teenage
yeah,
years. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because one thing that's coming up for me now is that it's easy to describe these things now, right? As in, it's a story that's people can hear it and it can sound as if that's something that just happened and it's a description of that time period. But I think what is really interesting about trauma is how it is leaves an impact in our body, our whole felt sense of our identity, really. And so, yeah, what I'm wondering is like at that point with all the bullying and with all of what was going on at that time, and then of you're already struggling, and then on top of it, your mum commits suicide. In that moment, when you first heard about it, or I don't know how you heard about it, and in that time period afterwards, what was that like fundamental like self-identity shift that happened at that point where you went from one version of Alex into another?
Mm. It had already begun months earlier, as I had actually saved her. Especially one time, I had gone out chasing after her to save her from a suicide attempt that I became
Oh,
aware
yeah.
of. And then there was a very traumatic event, as she declared matter of factly how many times she's been trying to commit suicide. And the
But she,
way,
she said that to you?
yeah, she created this kind of relationship with me,
Yeah.
where she related to me as a if I was an adult, uh,
Oh,
and she would also reveal pain and suffering directly with me. And this is me being age 12 and 13.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, uh, and in this instance, declaring how much she's been trying to commit suicide. And she actually
yeah.
told it to me very matter of factly, and being on so many pills and alcohol, she was shut off from any form of empathy or ability to recognize me, actually, or
Yeah.
any form of emotional resonance was shut off. And I wasn't aware of the concept emotional resonance or how that was supposed to feel. But
Yeah.
what formed my identity and perspective on reality was the complete lack of it. And I
Mm,
remember how hard this struck my whole felt beingness. And how,
mm,
I remember so well the instance looking away, crying, and she not understanding my crying at all or responding to it. Me looking away out to the world and recognizing how completely unsafe it was, how shut
mm,
off I was, how cold everything was, and how cut off
mm,
from any sense of, happiness, love, safety I felt. Um, so at the point of her suicide, me being the last person she spoke to, I had a good sense that she was dead before the news was delivered to me. Um, I, I, f- I s- kept sinking into this coldness, this deeply detached, isolated coldness.
mm,
And a sense of guilt, you know, me turning this to be my fault and actually declaring to myself that I killed my mom.
Mm.
Uh, that was formed as my identity and my view on this. For some reason, I remember that evening when I discovered anger. I discovered anger as amazing, uh, this amazing energy field where if I just turn this into hostility to everybody and everything,
Yeah.
I could protect myself at some core center. But that's when
Yeah.
I began to, I met friends that were already, dropping out of the ordered way of living, petty crimes and drinking and drugs and all of that. And that's where I sort of got to form a new identity and some brotherhood and companionship and belonging. So from this detachment, but finding the ability to be, well, what it was to me was to be dangerous so as to get some respect, or not to ever end up in that victimhood again that I had spent in while being bullied.
Yeah. And was this a conscious decision, or was it something that automatically seemed to come about? Like, do you remember thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna do this because, like, or this feels good to be angry, and I can really see how this shifts my experience." Like, obviously, being that young, you're not going to use those terms. Or was it that's the description you have of just the automatic shift that just happened?
It's an interesting question because it makes me see a couple of things I haven't paid attention to before. And it is
Yeah.
that the experience of life to me can differ so entirely when it's from an ego structure as compared to from straight up presence. And they're incompatible completely. So looking back at that time period, being 13 years old, 14 years old, 15 years old, I was living life out of an ego structure, which is, universally normal for a human being to be.
Yeah.
So now I recognize I had no control of what was happening whatsoever,
Yeah.
including the choices I felt myself making or decisions, the decisions I made. Um, Now I can see, well, it just happened. This all these different events, all the energies, all the relationships, it formed me. It directed me. Um,
Yeah. 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 Because I'm just thinking from my experience, there were certain um, like after doing a lot of work on myself, just by going into the memories, accessing things that were unconscious, I can describe certain points in time where it was like I made a decision there, like, but it wasn't a decision that it was literally like I'm caught in a stream and I'm going that
yeah,
regardless. Uh, Whereas now, for example, if what happens is like, say, I'm feeling something, I'm feeling bad, I become more aware of it, and then there's a choice that sort of happens because I'm like, there's all these thoughts here, there's all these emotions, there's all these memories, and I'm facing them, and that gives me a different choice because I'm more aware of what it is that I'm actually in. Whereas when you're 14, 15, 16, it's just you're caught in the stream.
yeah. And thank you for clarifying that because uh, yes, there was clearly such an instance of after my mom's suicide, it consumed me, and it
Yeah,
was like it
yeah,
got me sinking into a hole. And then this one night, I just discovered anger as a resource, and I just grabbed on it with all my
yeah,
might, and I found, as I said, the power, and that formed the decision that this can save me, which led to me becoming increasingly more aggressive and as a teenager, quite violent and dangerous
Yeah.
on the streets. Because I grabbed onto it and I kept grabbing onto it with all that I had until, this was my lifeline. So that's why I had this consistent, hostile eyes and contracted, angry face and being generally frustrated and still detached to a high degree. Uh,
Yeah.
and only in hindsight could, as doing the somatic work, could I realize what was actually behind that anger, because it wasn't a true, well-grounded, centered, powerful. I refer to it as self-worth and self-respect when it's genuine anger. But this was a shield, a control mechanism.
Yeah. 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 And so even it's funny because even though obviously you were living with this anger and acting out from it, um, when you decided to like look at anger itself in your own experience, was it like a recognition like, oh, actually, I'm angry. I'm really angry all the time. W- was that what it is? Or was it more like, oh, I'm actually like, I can see the defense mechanism here and therefore, or was it more just like oh my God, I'm angry.
Uh, I want to go through the whole bit of it because this is sort of has been mind-blowing over the last couple of years. And how I
Yeah,
would describe it is initiating the somatic work, uh, doing the somatic testing of my body to discover what I feel.
yeah,
Initially, what I was in contact with was basically ground level frustration, easily agitated,
yeah,
and
yeah,
discovering enormous amounts of fear, terror, and shame in my experience continuously until I started to tap into emotions. At tapping into emotions was at which point I discovered the degree to which I was repressing sadness and hurt and vulnerability overall. Uh,
mm,
and from that standpoint, anger was my go-to and it was immediate.
mm,
So anytime I would come near anything that resembled sadness and hurt, I would just bounce quickly into this agitated
mm,
anger. And one key discovery was in a community where somebody, with joy and heart asked what our favorite movies were.
yeah,
And I discovered instead of tuning into what my favorite movie was, I turned to anger because that kind of friendship felt hostile to me. It felt dangerous
oh,
that even
yeah,
somebody wanted to be friendly with me. And I kept discovering it, like when I went to the shop and somebody offered to help me carry, that would evoke anger in me. Again, out of being so afraid of vulnerability itself. Uh,
yeah,
that any show of affection, love, or kinship would just evoke fear in me. This was something
yeah,
I yet wasn't fully aware of because I got to spend one intense half year and then a year in reversing repression of hurt and sadness, which meant I taught my body to cry again, and I would cry often. At a certain depth of connecting to what had been hurt throughout my life, I discovered a new resource of what actual anger is like, what an actual sense
mm,
of self-worth, self-respect, and capacity to have boundaries, capacity to have needs. At which point I discovered that the anger, aggressiveness I had shown before was entirely made up of fear. That was the energy behind it. So I looked dangerous, aggressive, violent, perhaps to some people, in a sense of power, since I could control and scare others.
yeah,
But there wasn't any ounce of anger in it. It was just all fear, masquerading uh,
yeah.
as this. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.